Greetings internet, it's Monica, and today I am doing a new recent reads video. This is actually pretty soon after my most recent reads video. I wanted to test out doing more frequent recent reads because I just feel like sometimes I get to the end of the month and then all of a sudden I have like a 30-minute video. And yeah, so I wanted to try splitting it up a little bit more and just giving myself a little bit more time to talk about each book and what I thought about it. So that is what I'm doing here. I am so excited because if you guys watched my last recent reads video, you know that I had some reading struggles. I read a few books that were not my personal favorites, and also read one that I think might be my least favorite book of the year. We'll see, but yeah, it wasn't a great reading month. So going into this month, I was just trying to be really selective about the books that I picked out, and I'm really happy because so far my reading month this month has been amazing. It's been such a good month of books. So yeah, I have 3 books today that I want to talk about, and I am going to kick off by talking about Sadie by Courtney Summers. So this is a book that has been getting a lot of buzz on the bookternet over the past couple of months. I started hearing buzz around it because of the format that the story is told. Basically, if you're not familiar with this story, it sort of plays off of the surge in popularity of true crime podcast. So half of the story is told as this podcast. It's told via transcript of this man who is doing this podcast about the disappearance of this teen girl, and it's told in rotating perspectives, so it goes back and forth between these 2 perspectives, but the other half is told from the perspective of the girl who went missing, Sadie. And I ended up picking it up via audiobook, via the Scribd app, because I knew that this format was so unique. So I'm actually partnering with Scribd for this video. They have sponsored this video. You guys know I love Scribd. It is the primary way that I read audiobooks, and I just adore the platform, and I also really love just how much you get for less than $10 a month. You get to read unlimited audiobooks, ebooks, etc. I read Sadie on Scribd, and it's a book that I would say the best way to read it is via audiobook, because they have a full cast for this book. Macmillan literally made the podcast. So when you're listening to it, you truly feel like you are listening to a podcast, and then it switches to Sadie's perspective. The reading experience is just so unique and immersive that I just have to highly recommend the audiobook for this one. It's the type of audiobook that it really heightens the experience of reading. The plot of Sadie follows Sadie, who at the beginning of the novel is running away from home, and you know that her sister has been murdered and her mother is missing, and you kind of can infer from the way that things are talked about at the beginning that her sister was not only murdered but also sexually assaulted. And the story takes off from there. And so she goes missing, so you follow her journey of where she goes. And then you also follow the podcast, which takes place after the events of Sadie's perspective and recounts sort of this missing person's true crime story. At its heart, though, it is a story about, in my opinion, sort of society's fascination with violence against women. I think one of the most powerful moments in the book is at the very beginning, and the podcast host says very clearly, we're not gonna go into the details of what happened to Sadie's sister. I think oftentimes violence against women is used in the media in a way that is exploitative, and I just really valued this book because at no point did it ever feel exploitative. It always felt like like, yes, that's part of their story and it's part of the story of this book, but it's not something that's going to be used for shock value or used in a way that would be disrespectful. The effort and creativity that went into creating this audiobook is just next level. The story itself is also amazing. Like, I totally think that if you just read it like normally, you would still like love the story. Like, I loved this story, but yeah, the audiobook is just like top notch. It's so good. Definitely check this one out if you haven't already. And thank you again to Scribd for sponsoring this video. I love Scribd. I love the service. I use it myself on a personal basis. I've used it for months. If you guys watch my reading vlogs, you know that I am always using Scribd. So highly recommend checking them out. I'll have a link in the description box below if you want to read Sadie or if you want to check out Scribd. And yeah, moving on to the next book. The first one is one that wasn't really on my radar until I was hanging out at my friend Reagan's apartment, and I think I like randomly like commented on one of these books on her shelf, and she just like raved about how good it was. I was just in the mood for a really good atmospheric fantasy, so I had to pick it up. And that book is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This book is so good, and I totally did not expect it to be as like beautifully written as it is. It is so stunning. Just every word of it is amazing. It is definitely a bit of a slower read, but I didn't mind it. Like, every single page of this book was just such a treat. This book takes place in a sort of historical Russia-like world, and we follow three girls who are all from different walks of life, but are all being pushed down or stuck in some way. So for example, Miriam is one of the girls, and she is the daughter of a moneylender who is not very good at money lending. And so the first like 50 pages of the book are basically about her sort of taking on that role herself, and it's so good. Like, I didn't think I could read about money lending for so long, but I could read about money lending and Miriam like just getting people to pay her for like hundreds and hundreds of pages. It was so good. And then we also follow two other girls. One is the daughter of a very cruel and abusive father, and they're a very poor family. And then the third is the daughter of a lord, but she has sort of been pushed to the sides by her family and completely like ignored because she isn't beautiful and isn't seen as a benefit to her family. And so the story itself is about these three girls who, the story is called Spinning Silver, so it's sort of playing off of that Rumpelstiltskin myth of turning silver to gold. But I feel like in a lot of ways the whole story is about these girls turning their lives from silver to gold. And I love it. I love it so much. It's so beautifully written and atmospheric, and the prose in it is just like, oh, it's just like butter. I just loved reading it. And this, like, I kind of wish I had read it during winter, because like it's such a wintry book, but it definitely put me in the mood for winter, and I cannot wait for Christmas time. I might need to pick this book back up then because it was just so good. And I definitely want to read Uprooted, because that is her other book and I haven't read it, and I loved this one so much. The final book that I want to talk about, and I might talk about this, like I might do a full video or something about this book, like something based on this book in the future, because it has had such a huge impact on me, and I've just like, it's just like caused a lot of like thinking to happen. And that is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. Now this book is one that I have had on my TBR ever since it came out. It's one that I've been so excited for, but I never picked it up, because I think part of me thought that it would be kind of daunting or like hard to get through, and it's not. It's so like compulsively readable. And this family is, you know, yes, it does span a lot of time. Like, you go from the early 1930s to, I believe, like the late 1980s. And so you go through a large period of time. It's not a small book, but I just flew through it. I couldn't put it down. I needed to know, like, how this family just like continued their life. Basically, this book follows a family. They start off in Korea. You follow this girl who is Korean. She grows up in the countryside, and you follow her journey and then eventually her family's journey of immigrating to Japan and living through both the colonization of Korea, the horrible treatment of Koreans in Japan, and then World War II. And it's just like this amazing multi-generational story about family, and it's so amazing, especially like about like halfway through it, I got to a point of like, I got to a year where basically my mom had been born. And that for me was really, really mind opening, because like I knew that my mom was born into a much different Korea, and I knew that her childhood was not easy. But to read this book and to, it does take place in Japan, not in Korea, but to read it and then like just read about what they were going through, and then reading about like their worries about all the people who were living in Korea, or just like anytime they talk about like the people who are living in Korea at that time period, was just, it was really mind-opening for me. I don't really have a better way of talking to it. I feel like every time I would pick this book up, every time I put it back down, I wanted to call my mom and just talk to her, because she has lived so many different lives and has lived through so much. And reading this really puts a lot of that in perspective for me. And especially because this is like so not long ago. Like I think about that, and like my mom's childhood, like the Korea that my mom grew up in is so vastly different to the one that exists today. And it's mind-boggling to think about, and to contemplate all of that. And at its core, this book is a story about resilience, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I loved this family. I loved every second of it. I don't really want to talk to like what happens to them or like why they moved to Japan, because I think like getting those revelations and having that experience is really like, it's such an amazing experience when reading this book. So I want to like let you all have that yourself. But 100% recommend picking this book up. I'm so happy that I finally did. I'm mad at myself that it took me so long. But I just loved it. I loved it so much. And I am so excited that they are adapting this book into a mini-series. I believe Apple is doing it, which is interesting. I think it's like one of their, if not their first adaptation, or one of their first. And I'm so excited for that, because like I'm excited to watch this with my mom and to just talk about it with her, because my mom doesn't read. And so to be able to like discuss this story with her is going to be so amazing. And so I cannot wait until that comes out so that I can have that opportunity. But yeah, I adore this book. Please pick it up if you have not yet, and if you're like at all worried about like this being too dense. It is not. It is so readable and a beautiful, beautiful story. So highly recommend that. So yeah, those are the books that I have recently read, 3 of them. I am really happy about my reading month so far. I've loved all 3 of these books, and I would love to hear from you guys. If you've read any of these, let me know in the comments down below. If you have any audiobook recommendations, also let me know, because after Sadie, like I just want like more really cool audiobooks. Like I know I've talked in the past, Echo is another one that I love. Like that's another one where I just feel like I love it when when audiobook creators go above and beyond for the audiobook. And Echo was one where they it's a story where music is a hugely important part of the plot, and so they actually got musicians to come in and to play these pieces. And it's such a beautiful audiobook experience. So if you have any audiobook recommendations like that, definitely let me know in the comments too. And I'd also just love to hear what you guys are reading this month, and I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye!